Not going to stick around too long, but I wanted to share a Federal Reserve speech that just came out from Michelle Bowman. Of course, Michelle Bowman, Federal Open Market Committee, voting member, definitely influential on monetary policy. And what I found interesting about this particular speech is that it's pretty long and it's kind of boring, but about halfway through it, she's talking about distributed ledger technology, right? And we all know about distributed ledger technology and ultimately the idea of a central bank digital currency, or she didn't come out right out and say that, but all the ideas of regulating such an idea of a central bank digital currency, or at least a digital currency that the central bank is then regulating, right? But it's ultimately talking about this central bank, or talking about a digital currency. Got to slow down. Hold on, let me take a drink of water. I'll slow down. All right. Ultimately talking about a digital currency that 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 the central bank can then regulate. Now, when I think about the central bank digital currency, or I think about any time the central bank or the Federal Reserve or any kind of idea of a banking system that is using a digital currency, I think back to one of the original videos that I had done on this channel, and I left a link down in the description. And in this video, I was talking about an IMF blog where they were talking about having a e-currency. See, they didn't even have a name for it at the time. And the reasonings that they wanted to have this e-currency is so that they could go into a cashless society, right? They wanted to be able to pull cash out of the system. And now, if they pulled cash out of the system, they would be able to achieve their goals of taking interest rates into negative territory. This was the idea of the IMF many, many, many years ago. Long before we ever saw central bank digital currencies coming to any kind of communication through, like, even China issuing them or other nations who have set them up. This was long before that. I was one of the first, and I'm not trying to brag, it's because of this IMF article that I had stumbled across. And I was talking about a cashless society at the time. I didn't even care about digital currencies. But ultimately, that's what they were talking about way before anybody started talking about these things. Okay? And so when we think about what it is that they were trying to do, is that if you have cash in the system, it's going to be very difficult to go into negative territory, because that's really ultimately what their goal would be. And now I know from what it is that I know about monetary policy is that monetary policy had come to an end because the interest rate adjustments didn't work anymore. The low neutral interest rate environment that I always talk about had created a neutral interest rate that was so close to the lower bound that once the Federal Reserve had hit zero, it wouldn't stimulate the economy anymore. But if they can go negative, it could. This is where the central bank digital currencies, or having a digital currency, is going to start stepping in. It's not so that they could control and tax and do all that. That stuff will occur. All right, that's going to be a major problem that we're going to have to face with it. But that's not the reasons that they're doing it. This is important to understand. The reasons why they're doing it is so they can take interest rates into negative territory, and they can continue on with their system, because it's failing them right now, right? We all know eventually the credible threats are going to fail. Like, I call them out early. Eventually, everybody else is going to see it too. And once that happens, they are going to have no other choice. And so if they can, by that time, have a digital currency in a regulated, or even a stable coin that's at play, pulling cash out of the system, leaving us with nothing but digital transactions, then they could take interest rates into negative territory, because we can never get our money out of the system. It will forever be locked up in there. And now, I've heard a lot of people say that they would not go that direction. Like, they will refuse it at all costs to do all transactions in cash and to hoard it. Well, eventually what's going to happen is, and if you go and read the IMF blog, they've discussed that this is exactly what people would do. And that if they go and start hoarding onto the cash, what they'll do is they'll make it burdensome. Go to the bank with cash, and they're going to charge you a fee to show up with it, to deposit it. If you want to withdraw, it's going to charge you a fee. No matter what, the cash is going to be charged. You go to the store, they're not going to want it. They take it to the bank, they're going to get charged a fee. This is how they're going to start getting cash out of the system, and they'll force you into the digital currency. And once you're forced into the digital currency and have given up all your cash, then that's it. They can take it into negative territory. They can track, trace, tax, do whatever they want after that. And it was a plan set forth a long time ago. Like, this isn't something that's new. And anybody who hadn't seen it really chose not to, or just believed that it wouldn't take place. But I mean, since I was calling it out so long ago, I mean, go take a look at the video I leave down in the description of this channel. I have this video, and you're going to see there that this was a plan that not only was it to do exactly what it was intended to do, which is to be able to continue on with their monetary policy, which was the most important part of it all, right? Because that was coming to an end, and they know that this credible threat thing, it can only last so long. I mean, we know it too. Like, people have said it in the comments, well, how long can it last? Well, it'll last so long as people don't know that the Federal Reserve lost the ability to control monetary policy with the adjustment of interest rates. Since people don't know that, they can use their job owning, their signaling, their forward guidance, their, credible threats in order to guide the markets into behaving in a way that as if the markets had, or as if the Federal Reserve had adjusted rates. Because they still have that ability, they don't need to go negative yet. They don't need to do any of the other stuff, right? But eventually that's going to fail. And if they do have it in place at that time, the stable coins or the central bank digital currency or whatever it is that we are, guided into using, right? Whatever it is, if they have it there in time, then hopefully in their imaginations, if they could do it there, if they could get it there in time, they would be able to go negative with their interest rates and therefore be able to stimulate the economy. Now, what that would look like is a whole new world, right? I mean, who can imagine what negative interest rates would be like, especially if you think about buying like a house and a mortgage having a negative rate, which has happened in the past. I mean, not here in the United States, but I believe it did happen in Denmark, if I remember right. Where there was some adjustable rate mortgages that had actually gone negative at one point, which is really surprising to even think about. But if you can understand the bond market and how prices go up and the yields go down, the prices on the adjustable rate mortgage-backed securities that were out there, or the mortgage-backed securities that were backing or being backed by the mortgages, the adjustable rate mortgages, however you want to look at that, those particular bonds went up so much in value that it literally drove the yields negative. It's crazy to think about, but it happens. And so if they have a negative interest rate environment, that can only occur if you have a cashless society. And here you have the Federal Reserve talking about the regulations of a digital current or a digital ledger technology, talking about the blockchains, talking about the transactions that are going to go digital, and talking about the regulations of the industries that are going to be built on that system, right? Because it's like, you think about it, it's a whole new world, right? So anyhow, talking a little fast, but I wanted to get a bunch of information out. We're 8 minutes into it. We're probably going to stick it out for another 20 minutes. What do you guys think? Digital currencies on their way. All right. And what are we going to do about it other than to get into gold and silver? And there's no fighting the system, right? So, obviously it's going to be on its way. It's going to come. This is actually coming because just like anything, like, when I've talked to buddies who were like going through like, relationship issues or something like that. And it was just like, man, she's talking about this stuff. And I'm like, dude, it's just face the facts, man. If she's talking about it, it's done. Right. And that's sad to think, but it's really just the case. The sooner you accept it, the better, because just like this, like the Federal Reserve is talking about it, it's coming, right? They wouldn't be talking about it. They wouldn't be dealing with it. They wouldn't be having the conversations about it if they weren't planning something, right? So it's obvious that it's coming. Now, if you go all the way back to the IMF article, it even proves there, right, that, hey, we need this particular circumstance to occur, right? We have these circumstances occurring that we need to deal with, like however you want to look at that. And this is it, right? We have to go cashless. We have to have a digital currency. We have to have this in play. And if we don't do this, then we're not going to have any ability to go into negative territory with our monetary policy, and hopefully forward guidance can last us, until it busts, right? I don't know. All right. 246 people watching with 52 likes. Go hit that like button. We're going to be out here for another 20 minutes, and more people are joining in on the conversation. Will make this chat a lot more fun. You will have 30 days to spend money or lose it. It will be about velocity. Yeah, John Williams, I don't doubt that at all. In fact, I believe that's something that was actually stated within the possibilities. I read so much stuff coming from the Fed, and it's hard to remember exactly where everything is if I don't like save it in my computer or put it down somewhere. It's just like, where the hell was that? Where did I find that? Who said that? And I can't remember exactly all the parts and pieces, but it does seem to me, I remember that there would be, and I don't remember if this was necessarily coming from the Fed or if this was coming from Congress, right? And I think this is one of the reasons why I didn't bring it up in a video, or I maybe didn't make a video about it, is because it was a political issue and not necessarily the monetary policy talking about it, but the idea of being able to not only put a time limit, but then also a direction on where this money can go. Like it can only be spent on food or fuel or energy or something of that nature. And you think about it, like if you had a natural disaster kind of occurrence, how awesome would that be for the people to be all of a sudden just instantly loaded up with digital currency that could be used for fuel and only used for fuel, so it's not used in any kind of abusive manner because you can track where every single digital dollar goes. Now, I'm not trying to be an advocate for it at all, right? Like that's not what I do. What I'm trying to, put into the understanding is what it is that this digital currency could do. And if you do think about some of the positive aspects of it, you can know that those are the things that they are going to use to try and sell to the people, right? So if you can understand this is the signs, of what it would be like in order for, the digital currency to actually occur, you almost have to say, okay, well, how would I accept this into my life? And what is it that I would say yes to when it comes to a digital currency? And if you are in a natural disaster or you're hungry or you need some sort of, necessity out there and they're like, here, just go ahead and download this app. Most people are probably going to say, how do I get that app? What's the name of it? And they'll just go right and do it. So unfortunate circumstances of it. All right. Moving on here. Let's see. What are you guys talking about? What do you think would happen assets like gold and silver in the event of a central bank digital currency rollout? Well, that's, there's a couple of schools of thought to that, Leo. Is that, a lot of people think that the digital currency forced upon the people will then cause like gold and silver to possibly go way up in value, as they would be like the untrackable, untraceable currency out there outside of some of the digital currencies that may be existing. But really, that's one idea. The other one is that you won't be able to have like an on and off ramp for your gold and silver, meaning that you would literally have to find somebody who would be able to trade this gold and silver for, goods and services that are out there. And that would be kind of cumbersome, as that you don't know exactly, unless you have a network built up of people, like not everybody may be falling into that belief. Everybody might be going into digital currency. So then you would be like, man, what do I do with this gold and silver other than maybe sell it back into industrial use? And in that case, who knows what it would be worth at that point. And, I just think about like where it is that I could go for like how liquid is this market? And when it comes to silver, as far as having a personal possession, it's one of the most liquidable items that you could possibly have. Like you take a 1 ounce silver and you go down to the local bar. Like pretty much if you can't find it at one local bar, you just keep hitting bars until somebody will be like, yeah, I'll do it. All you have to do is just like, hey, I don't mean to interrupt anybody in their conversations, but I'm broke. I got, this here 1 ounce silver eagle. You can check it out. I will take $25. It's worth 30 here. I'll take, you could probably, boom, somebody will nab it right up if, it wouldn't take long. Or you could just go down to the coin shop or the jeweler or somebody else. Most likely you're going to be able to find somebody to buy that right away. And that's what's really cool about it. Now, if you cannot take that and go and trade it for a digital currency just instantaneously, like you're forced out of it, it's just like it cannot be used to purchase silver, then that's going to be very difficult to then use silver as like a means of doing any kind of exchange, because most people would be like, I can't do it because I can't exchange it for anything other than somebody else who's wanting to have some sort of silver possession. Now, that's a really, really, really far off thought. right? Like that whole thing. Because here's the thing about digital currencies, and that one thing that I have definitely come to understand about currencies is that there has to be confidence. Period. Right? In order for the fiat currency to exist, there has to be confidence. And if there is no confidence behind it, it will not work. So, in order for there to be confidence, people have to know that no matter what, they're going to be able to do whatever they want with this money. And that's exactly what they're going to be able to do with it. There will not be any limitations. There will not be any, like, even I could even imagine that if they had a central bank digital currency stable coin or something of that nature that was then in use, they would even allow black market illegal deals to be done with it just to make sure that they could get the confidence of the people that they're not going to get in trouble for having it. They will not force them into any other currency. It'll be a currency that is accepted and nobody will make any difference about it. They will not think anything about it. And this is what I could imagine by the time the people have figured out that there is no more cash in the system and that they are locked in and they don't understand. Sorry, I just cut out there. It may take an entire generation for this to occur. And, it wouldn't surprise me if that was the plan. And you can see how slow this is rolling out. The idea of what it would take in order for people to be accepting of a cashless society, a digital currency that does track and trace you and have no care whatsoever would really have to start from the time you were very young. Like if you were aware of it in a fashion that scared you because you remember when you had cash and then it's no longer there and you're forced into the system. But if you didn't understand that you never had cash, like then you wouldn't be like, whatever, dude. This is like, it ain't no big deal. All right. Especially if it was one that was just like, hey, you're in an emergency here. Just go ahead and download the app, and there it is. All right. Moving on. Wow. People move around and educate yourself. Stop swallowing small bits of some information. I wonder who he's talking to. You know how much information that I have done? Oh my gosh. I dove into some stuff. All right. Third time Brics going to interfere. I don't know. I mean, what are they going to interfere with? They don't do enough. They don't do enough in the amount of currency production in order to facilitate all the trading that's needing to be done around the world. I mean, the only way that the BRICS nations could really take over is if there was a massive depression. Right. And if there was a massive depression, then yeah, okay, I totally get it, because that would be a crashing of the United States dollar. And that's the only way a new currency is going to step in. Otherwise, it's going to have to be a symbiotic relationship with the dollar, because the dollar is the currency that is in existence. It is the one that everybody is using. And if you want to take it over, you have to understand Gresham's law, right? There has to be a symbiotic relationship with the dollar that people are willing to accept. It can be done through a digital currency. It cannot be done through competition. I mean, I don't even consider the BRICS nations producing a currency. I don't even think about it, right? I mean, no matter what they do, there was nothing that they can do that's going to compete with what the dollar is doing. None of them want to go into deepest debt as the United States to produce the safe and liquid asset like a U.S. Treasury, and none of them want to do any kind of deficit trade. They all want to be producers. None of them want to be importers. So if you're not importing stuff and exporting currency, then you're not going to be able to compete with the United States dollar, because that's what the dollar is doing. And no other currency, no other nation, and nobody else wants to do it. You come out with the gold currency, and the people will hoard it, guaranteed. You won't have any currency to do any transactions with, and you'll be back at the dollar again. So until the dollar completely fails, I don't care. Like, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't, like, all the BRICS nations and stuff like that, they can do all the deals they want. They will do deals. And I'm not saying they ain't going to do deals that are outside of the United States dollar. They're going to probably do a lot of them. And that's probably going to end up being a benefit to the United States dollar, considering how much debt is due in dollars outside of this country has created a demand for dollars that is just stupidly high, higher than anybody could ever imagine. And there needs to be some sort of relief for that. All these people want to do transactions in dollars. They have created contracts in dollars. These are entities and corporations and people and stuff outside of the United States. Don't have anything to do with our government, our banks, our people, our corporations, nothing. but yet they have created contracts that are due in dollars, and these contracts themselves get used for transactions. This is like, if you, and don't think that the Fed don't know this. Like, go and read dollar funding stresses in China. Dollar funding stresses in China, Federal Reserve. And you can read a document that talks all about this, issue specifically to China. And they know that it's existing all around the world. But that exact thing, how much dollar-denominated debt actually exists that China has produced. Like, they created dollar-denominated debt that is due in dollars, and this debt, it gets used for transactions. And this is really where the dollar strength comes from. So it's very difficult for, like, the Brics nations to take that over, until there's a complete collapse, and then I get it, right? But until then, if nothing else, they're actually relieving the problem of the Federal Reserve having to come up with this damn currency in order to provide to the world to cover all those dollar-denominated debts that exist, without creating a dollar that's so strong that our exports is like, our exports that we manufacture, try to get out to the world, become just absolutely impossible, as our dollar is so much stronger than everybody else's, as the demand for it goes increasingly high from all this dollar-denominated debt that exists. Why reduce interest rates to sub-zero? That's a great question, actually, because I talk way too deep for most people to gather, and I don't mean to. I just studied it so much. I can't believe, like, some of the shit that I picked up. Let me see if I can find a pen. Let me show you, for example, why it is that they have to go sub-zero. All right, and it's because of something called the neutral interest rate, and the lower bound is zero. Okay, so now what would typically happen is, if you can imagine back in the early 80s, right? So I'm just going to put 1980 down here. Right? Interest rates are somewhere around 15%. I forget exactly what the Fed funds rate were at, but just forgive me if I don't get it right, but it was somewhere around 15%. Okay. And now, over the years, what has happened is as this Fed rate has gone all the way down to zero. Now, something very interesting about that is that it's taken years to get there. Now, why did it take years to get there? Is because at 15%, it gave them a lot of room to move in order to stimulate the economy. At 15%, it was very restrictive in order to stop the inflation of the 70s and all kinds of stuff. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but that's why it was up there, right? Volcker, all that. Okay, so anyway, it was up at 15%. Anytime that the economy started going into issues in which that there was a slowdown in the economy, recessionary pressures started to kick in. Now, what the Federal Reserve is, it would lower interest rates, the Fed funds rate that they had set at 15%, they would lower them around 5%, right? By dropping this interest rate 5%, the Fed funds rate, what that would do is it would end up bleeding into the economy. And I call it bleeding into the economy because that's really how it is. It's because it's like a cut here, cut there, and it starts finding its way into the economy. It takes time to get there, right? So it's like bleeding out. So it's not like as soon as they fire interest rates off, it starts to impact the economy. It takes time, right? So anyway, dropping interest rates 5% would typically stimulate the economy, and this is how the Federal Reserve would operate all the way up until one day they hit the lower bound of zero, right? Where they could no longer stimulate the economy. Now, something very interesting was also taking place at that exact time, is that once they hit the lower bound of zero and they could not stimulate the economy anymore, they figured out that they knew that they would have to change monetary policy. So right, and they can't go below zero with negative interest rates, because the idea of taking negative interest rates means that people would start pulling their cash out of the bank, and then the banking system wouldn't work. So once they got to zero, right, they got to zero and they had this neutral interest rate, which was the rate that was neither accommodating nor restricting the economy. Here they're at zero, and the neutral interest rate was somewhere around 0 to 1.5%. Nobody knows. So I'm just going to put it up here at like 1%. Here they are at zero, right? Now, what is it that they are supposed to do in order to go into the future, right, and get their monetary policy back in order to try and stimulate the economy? Now that my pen is dead, right, in order to stimulate the economy, the farther they move that interest rate up, the further above the neutral interest rate they're going to go, the harder it is on the economy, right? Because the further above the neutral interest rate you get, the more restrictive it becomes. So in order to stimulate the economy again, you're going to come down and you're going to hit the lower bound of zero of, and not be able to stimulate the economy. Well, this took place. This situation took place during the Trump administration, right in 2018. Damn it, my pen. In 2018, right? Well, anyway, 2018, that took place. Now, all of a sudden, boom, they can't stimulate the economy anymore. It was over. Monetary policy had effectively come to an end. Now, if they could take it down deeper into negative territory, then they could get below the neutral interest rate far enough to stimulate the economy. But since they can't do that without hitting the lower bound at zero, and then not have everybody start pulling their money out in cash, destroying the banking system, they were stuck here at zero. And this is where all the quantitative easing and everything else in the COVID stimulus packages and blah, blah, blah came out. Right? The same thing happened back during the great financial crisis too, right? But something very similar, but I just wanted to make it a little bit more recent on why it is that they would need to go subprime or subprime. Sub-zero on the interest rates. That would be the reason why. It's because of this silly damn negative interest or neutral interest rate that would then force them to have to go into negative in order to get far enough below or at least far enough below the neutral to stimulate. And typically, again, that would be a 5% drop that would come from here. So even from that time at Trump's administration, even at 2.5%, there was still not enough room to stimulate the economy. So they knew there was going to be forward guidance, fiscal policies, all this other stuff, quantitative easing, all the other things that was going to take in order to stimulate the economy, but it certainly wasn't going to come from the interest rate adjustments. And they knew it. Like they knew it a long time ago that was going to happen. So anyway, did you guys get that? Like, I don't know. That's what happened. And then even now, if you think about it, because they have interest rates at 5.5, right? 5.25 or 5.33, I think is what it's like. The effective fund rate is. So even at 5.33, right? You would think, okay, so now they got their ammo back, right? They could drop 5%, but really they still can't because they got to get below that neutral interest rate, which is still very low. Now, I believe that it is rising due to the inflation expectation and the elevated inflation and all that other stuff. I do believe that it is beginning to rise, the neutral interest rate, but it hasn't risen enough. And since nobody knows exactly where this neutral interest rate is, I don't believe the Federal Reserve has actually had enough of an elevated interest rate in order to bring the neutral interest rate far enough above zero for them to bring the stimulation back to the economy through the interest rate adjustments. See, I think as time goes on, if they can keep the interest rates elevated, the inflation expectation elevated, then the neutral interest rate will continue to rise. And this is actually them getting their ammo back, is by having that neutral interest rate rise, they can drop far enough below it to actually stimulate the economy again. So giving time into the economy with the elevated interest rates, I believe, was the ultimate plan coming from the Federal Reserve from a very long time ago, because I did videos saying that it was going to be, like getting high and staying high. I did a video like that a long time ago. And I knew this was going to come from this very strategy. And it seems to be working out this way. Like, I don't know how many other people see it like this because it's really complicated, and I get that. But really, this is how it's going down. Like, anybody who cannot explain this part of it, because this is so prevalent within the communications coming from the Federal Reserve, right? That this is an issue, this neutral interest rate. The monetary policy was discussed way back in 2018. I did plenty of videos talking about it as like one of the bases for my channels. And I know, like, from what I gather here in this information, is that there is a digital currency on its way. Now, whether it's not through the actual direct creation of the Fed or from the Fed, like with a Fed coin or something like that, or if it's the use of a stable coin, which I believe is probably more likely because they do so much discussion about stablecoins and regulations of stablecoins and the regulation of, anything else that happens to be using a stablecoin like kind of digital ledger technology application. So it seems to me that as long as people are continuing to use the dollar, which they will because they have no other choice, just like we discussed about the Brics nations, if they have no other choice but to use the dollar, and the dollar is now being used to back stablecoins and other stablecoin type products out there, then the Federal Reserve can then do monetary policy to the dollar, which would then transfer right into these stablecoins. And if they're already regulated within the markets, that those industries can build themselves. Like, they don't need anybody else to do it. Like, people's just own entrepreneurship will make it happen. And if you go into actually read Bowman's speech, she discusses that. We're going to break that speech down in a live stream, members only live stream. I haven't done one for quite a while. There's plenty of, like, member only content, but I want to break this particular speech down, and there's a couple of others. So we're going to do this on Wednesday. I encourage everybody to join the channel. It's $1 a month. It doesn't cost anything. You got plenty of content that's, totally worth the dollar. We've broken down plenty of speeches discussing monetary policy, talking about even the Basel III, talked about that. Michelle Bowman did a great speech on that one, and that we broke all the stuff down on what's going on there with the regulation of the, trying to tailor the regulation of the domestic banking system in order to accommodate the Basel III system, which is like the whole banking system trying to be on like this global I guess it would be governance, but as global, like kind of accordance, like they're all according to the same kind of idea or whatever, or at least the same regulation-ish kind of thing. I don't know how to quite explain it, but if you really go and you break down that speech, she really starts to talk about how it is that we can't really necessarily have a banking system that's involved with these, global banking system or global banks out there, when our local banks, all the way down to our smallest ones, have, particular, styles of banking that is just not going to be, accommodating to, this Basel III thing. So we have to tailor this thing down for our regional banks to be able to be part of this banking system if you want the United States to do it. And she did a great job of breaking all that down. Now, again, it's really complicated, and I don't want to say like I'm an expert on any of that stuff, but after you read that speech, it gives you a lot better idea of what it is that's going on with that, because so many people just have this misguided understanding of what's happening out there and what it is that the Federal Reserve is going to do with their monetary policy and in accordance of it and according to it. All right, $2 from B Dan82. What could America do to help the R-star rise? I don't know if you necessarily want the R-star to rise, or if you're like wanting to do something about that. The ultimately elevated inflation expectation is going to do it. And since most people have it, I think that's just going to do it all on its own. Now, if you go and you listen to what John Williams had to say about what was the main 3 contributing factors to a low neutral interest rate in this world, the first one was demographics, right? He said there was too many old people. He didn't say this. An older population was one of the reasons, and a low birth rate, right, was one of the reasons why there was a high or a low neutral interest rate. Older population has less contribution going into the economy. They're more of a drag on the economy instead of an increasing into the economy. And this is one of the reasons why he was given, or that John Williams was given, for there being a low neutral interest rate. The other one, the second one, was a slowdown in global growth. And now this one was a little bit difficult to understand, but it kind of related down to like if you were a plumber going into a town, like you just like, you graduated, your college schools, whatever, and you want to be a plumber, and you're like, hey man, I'm going to go back to my hometown, and you go to hometown to set up shop as a plumber, and you realize that there's too many plumbers in town, and that really there's just enough construction to handle what's already there. But if there was like apartment complexes and businesses being built and all this other stuff, there'd be plenty of room for plumbers, but there's no room for growth. There was a slowdown in global growth, kind of in that kind of sense, right? There wasn't enough, room out there in the world to continue on with a increase in growth, which is what everybody's looking for, because everybody wants a pay raise, right? Okay. So that was number 2. And the third one was a heightened demand for safe and liquid assets. And this drove a wedge between those assets, those like government treasuries, U.S. government treasuries, and corporate bonds. And this heightened wedge was a problem for monetary policy. And this heightened demand for U.S. Treasuries, which was driving the yield down, was also driving the neutral interest rate down even further as well, as the inflation expectation that is elevated would then drive the U.S. Treasury yields high, as the investors out there would demand a higher return on the yield in order to compensate for the inflation expectation. But if a low inflation expectation is existing and it pushes down, or it puts this heightened demand for U.S. Treasuries, which drives the yields down, then that right there is what's creating the situation in which the neutral interest rates would come down as well. Okay, so those were the three main global problems that the Fed was facing for a neutral interest rate. Now, you guys following? I know this stuff is complicated, and I try not to make it complicated, but it's really complicated. But these are the truths. And if you don't believe me, right here, this is monetary policy strategies for a low neutral interest rate world. And if it says it right here. Three main global trends appear to the bulk of the decline of the neutral interest rate over the past century. One is demographics. Populations are aging as people are living longer and birth rates have fallen. The second is productivity growth, which has slowed around the world. The third is the heightened demand for safe and liquid assets, which has led to a wider wedge between the safe yields on government securities and the central bank reserves and yields on riskier assets such as corporate bonds. So it's like, once you have internalized it, you get it. It's just like, okay, so these are the main problems that they were facing out there. When you think about it right now, what happened after COVID? Everybody's like, I don't know the numbers. I don't know what the truth are of the numbers. I don't know how many people got sick. I got sick off of COVID, lost my sense of smell and taste. It was a terrible time. I didn't enjoy it at all. I don't know how many people died out there, but I heard a lot of people died, right? That's what I heard, right? And I heard it was a lot of like an older population of the older generations of the populations that had got most affected by this, fatal death of COVID. Right? So now I'm not trying to say anything about like that part anyway. Okay, we're going to set that aside. Hey, weird coincidental thing that they had a major problem with it, and yet this was one of the occurrences that just recently had taken place. Okay, really interesting. Okay, we'll just set that aside for just a second. All right, the next thing was global growth, right? Well, you think about like what every government did to their economy. They told everybody, go home, don't produce, don't do anything, sit there, take this check, buy everything off the shelf, right? And now when I watched what happened to restaurants, to small businesses, to all kinds of stuff that went happen out there, and it was a scary nightmare to see how much hacking to the economy was taking place during that time. But, again, it's just like this damn COVID. Darn it. Darn this thing, man. Look what it did, right? Created a room for all this new growth to possibly take place after you hack the legs out of all this economy. Really? Okay. Well, we're going to set that over there with the population thing, and all. Another weird coincidence. All right. Now, let's think about what happened with interest rates. Okay, so during the pandemic, unusual and exigent circumstances allowed the Federal Reserve to produce a special purpose vehicle that was there to buy corporate debt, called the Corporate Debt Lending Facility. They funded it with hundreds of billions of dollars and then blasted all over the media about how it was that the Federal Reserve was going to be picking the winners and losers by buying into corporate debt, which is something that they cannot do. However, it was an unusual and exigent circumstances, and because of this, they were allowed, through the permission of the Treasury, which helped out with the funding, to create this special purpose vehicle to buy this corporate debt. And the media push of this idea out myself talking about how the Federal Reserve was going to be picking the winners and losers forced the markets to understand for a fact that they could front run the Federal Reserve by buying into corporate debt, and then when the Federal Reserve goes to buy it, they could sell it back to them, right? This right here, this little information blast that went out there was enough to fund the markets themselves. For the markets to fund the corporations themselves. The Federal Reserve didn't even have to buy any debt. They did. The special purpose vehicle bought a little bit to create that special, that within that special purpose vehicle to create the credible threat, the the definite confirmation that they would buy it, right? That they would get into the market. Once they did that, it was off to the races. They didn't have to touch it after that, right? They got all the funding they needed. Well, what ended up happening is that as these people were jumping into the corporate debt, it started driving the yields down on corporate on junk bonds, right? Essentially, people were looking for return on yield. They couldn't find it in the U.S. Treasuries. They could find it up in this corporate debt. They had the absolute guarantee that they could sell it off to the Fed because the Fed had the special purpose vehicle to buy it. And everybody started pouring into this corporate debt, and it drove the yields down closer and closer to the U.S. Treasuries. Huh. Very neat. Very interesting. So the three main trends that John Williams was talking about happening in November of 2018, right? That's when this speech was given. The three main problems, right? Again, it was the demographics. Populations are aging. Well, nope, they were dying, right? The second was productivity growth. Yeah, not when you hack the legs out of all of it. Now you got all kinds of room to grow, don't you? Not yet. We're still hacking the legs out of a bunch of it, right? It ain't done, right? Still got to, I mean, they're still trying to deal with the problem with the low neutral interest rate, right? So, and then the heightened demand, right? For those safe and liquid assets like U.S. Treasuries. Now we see U.S. Treasuries rising. And this is going to drive it ever closer to the bonds. The bonds started shooting up as well. See, this is them fixing their problems that they had. I mean, I can see it. I can see it plain as day. Like when I saw all this taking place and I tried to explain it and I was showing it to people, they were like, dude, you're nuts. And I'm like, no, they needed everybody to die. They needed everybody to lose their job, and they needed the interest rates to become down to meet the U.S. Treasury yields. And it all happened. You know, like, I don't like, I mean, I'm not trying to say that I'm the smartest dude in the world, because I'm not, but this is what they said. This is their words, not mine. I mean, I'm just happened to look at it and it was just like, geez, you guys actually said this? Like, I mean, I remember reading this a long time ago. It was one of, you know, I mean, you can go and find it. It was one of the first videos I had ever done on my channel was talking about this particular speech. And I was like, I go back and I watch those videos and I was just like, I had no clue what I was reading, right? But it doesn't matter. Over time, I did figure it out. I just kept reading this thing over and over again and finding the information and piecing it together. And now it's so obvious to me what happened, right? Nobody else, I think, has pieced it together like this, right? That all the major problem that the Federal Reserve was facing with monetary policy in order to conduct themselves got solved during COVID. Or getting being solved during COVID. All right, let's move on. Hey, thank you very much, Chip, for joining the channel. You're going to really enjoy. We're going to do that Wednesday. I'm not sure. I'll put out once I, figure out what time I'm going to do it on Wednesday. I'll set up I'll schedule a day for it, and you'll be able to find it in the live portion of the channel. But it's going to be kind of a long one, and these things are, get prepared, like get your drinks, get your snacks and stuff like that, because they are really long. They're kind of boring, but they're really, really, really critical information. Once you have internalized this stuff and you see it, it's just like, it's so obvious to me. Like, I hear all this noise and political bullshit that happens out there, and I'm thinking, man, stop paying attention to that and start watching this. Like, start seeing how this is taking place, And it's like, I don't know. Anyway. Man, look at all these comments. Okay, thank you so much, Metal Sir, for the $2. Why did Larry A. Fink, CEO, speak at the G7 fascism? I guess. I don't know. Again, like the global governance, politicians, stuff like that, there's economic forces that are at play, right? And I can see them. I can see them at play. I can see them on a daily basis. And when I see the politicians reacting to them, people have a tendency to blame them for it. And I don't put blame on them. And if I put blame on them, then I would have to also put into the thought that there would be somebody that would sit there that you couldn't blame. Like somebody, like if they are the blame to create the problem, then you would have to be able to say, okay, these are the people that I can contribute to fixing the problem. And I don't believe that's possible, because I don't believe that the problem was created by them. I believe it was an economic force that is now so vastly pushed out of proportion through the fiat currencies and the separation between the rich and the poor and the ever increasing amounts of debt that is created in order to maintain the system, people will love to point at politicians and cause, and blame them and stuff like that, because that creates so much blame to go around. Right? But it's understanding it for why it's here, right? That's the more important part about it. Holy moly, man, I am really rambling in this one. All right, guys. Let's see here. 45 minutes into this. All right. Weird comments out here. Yeah, you see all that, but don't see your wife. Boy. Huh. Yeah. Man. Hey, Brody, you're out here. Where's this guy? There we go. The immigration thing is to keep the housing prices up. Hit the like button before the like button hits you first. 3 people I know personally died in their 50s. Thank you. Thank you. I see now. Cheers. Sub-Zero. Yeah. Thoughts on lumber prices and where they're going. I just recently did a lumber update. I would get your lumber while you can. Mill curtailments are running rampant through the West here. Lumber prices are down. 500 per thousand is not a profitable position for these mills, not since the inflationary scenarios has pushed up the input cost of labor cost, energy cost, transportation cost, everything that goes up into it. So right now, I would get lumber if you could store it, or if you have a project in mind right now, I would do it, and I wouldn't hesitate on it. That's not saying that lumber couldn't go cheaper from here, but even if it did go cheaper, I don't believe it could go much cheaper, with considering how much mill curtailment is already taking place. It would just mean that there would be ever increasing amounts of mill curtailment, and it would just shorten up the inventory even more. So that would just set the trigger for higher prices once the demand does increase. And now, if you're looking for when the demand is going to increase, that would probably be the critical question. And like, for all the people who want to invest in lumber or whatever, I do not give investment advice. But if you're looking for when I believe that the trigger moment would happen, is when the builders' sentiment for home buyer traffic turns positive. That one key indicator is the only one that I see that seems to limit the lumber demand going into the future. If there was, it's the only one that I can really find that seems to be incredibly negative. That is the one driving force that I think would then cause lumber demand to start to increase. It would start to increase the demand from the home builders to then be able to build a house now with the idea that they would be able to sell it into the future for a higher price. The only way they would truly feel that is not because the price is going up, but because the traffic of buyers is there. Once that sentiment turns positive, I believe it will be game on. Now, I don't know exactly where that is right now, but it is still fairly negative, and that's the one that I would watch. If that thing starts moving towards the positive, then I would get your lumber quickly before it pops. All right? That would be the indicator that I would follow. So again, not investment advice. All right. Osama, thank you so much for joining the channel again. All right. I kid you not, in 2014, I realized exactly what you explained regarding the neutral rate and not being able to move that anymore. Yeah. And that's like, it took me, to be honest with you, it took me studying this thing to figure it out. And I know a lot of people out there have figured this out. Like, I know I'm not the only one, but what really surprises me is that I would love to find articles and newsletters and other economists who share in my theory, and I cannot find them. Like, I can't find anybody who is speaking the way that I do about this stuff. Now, there might be people who kind of share some of the similar thoughts, but very few people can I find talk about the average inflation rate over time, right? And how it is that the Federal Reserve is not going for a 2% target, but going for a 2% going for an inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time, giving no definition to moderate or definition to sometime. So we don't know what moderately above 2% over some time means. But yet, this is their monetary policy. They changed this in August of 2020, August 27th of 2020. There's a great Jerome Powell speech explaining this exact thing. And then just recently, about 2 months ago, Michelle Bowman, again, influential FOMC voting member, reiterated that exact same statement, that appropriate monetary policy is seeking to achieve inflation that is moderately above 2% for some time. And again, with no definition to either one of those things. Now, how many people explain that? How many people know that? Hardly anybody. You talk about all the financial advisors. I dare you, if you have a financial advisor, go and have them explain to you the average inflation rate over time, the AFIAT. They would be like, oh, what? And if they can explain it to you the way I just did, then okay, cool. It would, like, I can't find anybody who even knows anything, about any of that stuff. And it's not easy to understand it if you don't dive into their policy and go read it and search it out for yourself, because nowhere in Bloomberg or the Wall Street Journal or anything do they talk about it to this level. I've seen them talk about neutral interest rate, and I actually have seen articles about average inflation, but not discussed to the point that it would actually explain what it really is. Nobody, it's not explained, not to anybody. All right, guys, we're going to give it an hour. I don't know what got into me. I was only going to do this for half an hour, but I just don't shut up. So let's give it 9 more minutes and then we'll call it quits. Don't forget the likes. It's easy and cheap. Yeah, it is. All right. 392 with 197 likes, $4 in super chats. All right. He says key is when builder sentiment for home buyer traffic. Now, home buyer sentiment, go back and listen again, because it's exactly, there is not home buyer sentiment. It's home buyer traffic turns positive, right? Because I believe the home buyer sentiment is starting to actually turn positive in a lot of ways, right? It's like moving very close to it, but home buyer traffic is deeply negative. And that's why I'm saying that's the one to watch, right? It's very specific. Yeah. All right. And once there's an increased demand from buyers and home builders, right? So that's the key to it. Remember, it's just write it down if you have to. Home buyer traffic, and then title the traffic part of it, because that's the one key indicator. Now, that I feel is going to be very telling of where lumber futures are going to go. Right? If that one starts to move, then I would get in it. I would get into your lumber purchase and get your stuff, because that's going to be when the home builders are going to be like, okay, finally, I feel comfortable. Bang, let's do it. All right. And that's what I think they're waiting for. I don't think they're waiting for it. I don't even think they know that. I just feel that. I honestly feel that when I listen to the home builders, when I looking at the market, when I think about things, I'm like, once the traffic shows up, once people are like, hey, I'm interested, they're going to be like, okay, let's get it on. I'm ready to work. Right? Because they're all like, I don't know, man. You like the prices. People don't seem to the economy's still going. It doesn't seem like should be going, but it's going, and the prices stay up, and dang. I don't build products if I'm not building a house, and how prices are up, dang, what I'm saying? It's just this is where, and then once they're like, man, people are showing up, they're all over, look at them lining up here, man, let's get it on, let's get some homes built. Right? That's the way it's going to go down. I'm feeling it. I can feel it. And if you think about it, you could probably feel it that way too. Anyone seeing how cold and cloudy June is? Yeah, that's the way it always is in Oregon, though. That ain't nothing new. All right, if you look at the reasons they really want CBDC, what part of it could they not accomplish with Bitcoin if it already negative interest rates like they want? Because, okay, so part of it is that Bitcoin is not a matter of going to negative interest rates. Bitcoin wouldn't allow for a negative interest rate environment, period. right? You couldn't possibly do it because there's nobody in the world who's going to loan out their Bitcoin for a negative interest rate. Right? It ain't going to happen. But people will buy a bond at a negative interest rate, which means they are willing to loan their money out at a negative interest rates if they believe that they can sell that bond into the future for a higher price, which would be driving interest rates ever deeper into negative territory. Understanding that concept, you can understand how negative interest rates can work, and that Bitcoin cannot create a negative interest rate environment. It's not possible because nobody would loan their money out to try and get a negative return on their Bitcoin. It just wouldn't make any sense. So only a fiat currency with a negative yielding bond could ever possibly take a negative interest rate environment into consideration. And that's the reason why fiat currency has to continue with a stable coin or central bank digital currency and not cash, right? Because if there was cash in the system, people would pull their money out in cash, which may not have a yield to it, but at least it doesn't have a negative yield from being in a bank account or something like that. So yeah, no, you can't use Bitcoin, you can't use gold, you can't use any of those things, because like you can use them as store of savings and value for yourself. Like personally, those things are awesome holding on, like for you personally, I can't see anything better. But no, as far as like a banking system or anything like that, you can't use Bitcoin and you can't use gold. CBDC is about control. No, it's about negative interest rates. I mean, the control is part of it, but it's all about taking negative interest rates. That's what it's about. Why do you think there is still money waiting on the side to buy real estate? Why? Because, well, okay, so here's the thing. No matter what, if you go back through every time in history, I don't care how far back you go, there is always going to be somebody who's looking for a place to live, right? Has there ever been a time in history that you could ever find or think of or could ever have possibly been where there wasn't somebody somewhere looking for a place to live, right? Always, right? There's always a demand for homes, no matter what, right? So if there is always a demand for homes, I already forgot what the question was. It was something about like the real estate, right? Let me go back here a little bit. I forgot what the question was. I should pause this so I could go back and look. God, you guys are talking so fast. Shoot. Oh, well, where is it at? I wanted to make sure I had the question right before I finished but I can't find it now. God, I'm so tired here. This is what I get for doing 2 live streams in a day. No, I can't find it, darn it. Oh, there it is. Okay, here we go. All right. My balls. Okay. I should have. Why do you think there is still money waiting on the sidelines to buy real estate? Okay, that's it. Yeah, I wanted to make sure I got that right. Is because if you think about it, there is always a demand, no matter what. There is always going to be somebody who is willing or wanting to buy a house, whether they can afford the house or not. There is always going to be somebody who wants it. Now, the more time goes on that there is less homes being produced, like there is taking place right now, this gap in production essentially, because there should be far more homes being produced than there is. This is not creating an environment that slows down the demand. This is an environment that increases the demand. Now, it doesn't necessarily increase the demand in the sense that the market looks at demand, because the market looks at demand in a way that, hey, these people can afford to buy a house. That's the demand, is the people who can afford it. But really, the demand is much bigger than that from the people who truly want a house, who just can't afford it and don't even think about buying a house because they can't be there. They truly do want one. That is all money sitting on the sidelines. If the price of the house comes down, all that money comes available. Right? The cheaper the house comes, the more available people are to buy the house. So there is a ton of money sitting on the sidelines simply from people who are saying, oh, I don't want to buy a house. But they really do, right? They don't want to buy a house because they can't afford it. They don't want to buy a house because they don't want to try. They don't want to buy a house because it seems like it's an impossible task that doesn't seem affordable to them, nor is it something that they're going to even attempt to do. But they truly want to, and if the circumstances were different, then they would be there. They are sitting on the sidelines even if they are not, right? I mean, everybody is sitting on the sidelines. It's just that they don't realize that they are until they can. I'm confused. Who is destroying houses? Where are all houses already built going? What are you talking about? The population is always growing, and you have to keep up with population increases. You have to keep up with the ever increasing amounts of deterioration to a house and rebuilding of one. Now, granted, there are some places in this world where they build houses that last hundreds of years, but here in the United States, we build houses out of wood and kind of items that deteriorate over time. And so if you build a house and you do nothing to it, I mean, good chances, depending on where you're at, I guess. But here in the Pacific Northwest, I'm going to guess you probably have 50 years on that house, right? And that thing is probably going to be pretty well deteriorated. The roofing is going to be gone. The siding is going to be gone. There's if you didn't put any paint or anything else on it, it's probably going to take even less time than that. So, it's houses aren't really built to last that much, right? So there's a constant regeneration of new houses, like tearing down one and building up another one, and then the complete just a completely redoing of another house, right? Rebuilding of it, which in a sense is somewhat building the house again, right? But there's not enough homes here to meet the demand. It's just obvious, right? If there was, then you wouldn't see the prices as high as they are. There has been times in the past in which that you did see where house prices came down due to financial issues that created circumstances that should never have allowed people to get into loans and create a housing market that existed in such fashions. It should never have happened, right? And now I know a lot of people look at what's going on right now in real estate and say, oh man, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be way worse and all this other stuff. Well, okay, yeah, I can agree. Can you give me any reasons why that's beyond that of what it is that happened during the great financial crisis? Because the same things that were happening back then do not even occur in the banking system today. It's like, I don't know where the hell people get the idea that it's going to be just like that, because it's not even. It can't. Like, the idea of what created those circumstances back then are just simply not even allowed to occur today. In fact, most of the people who have bought into the housing market now are the most highly qualified buyers. Most houses are purchased. Most houses are owned outright. I shouldn't say that. A huge amount of houses are owned outright, and with the majority of homes with the mortgage being less than that of 3.5%, it's like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, even underwater, like, there was more homes underwater before the pandemic than there is now. Right? There is no reason to even believe that there's going to be a housing market crash for anything other than the possibility of a total financial crash happening, and that dragging down mortgages or the mortgage market and everything else with it. And in that sense, yeah, okay, I could see where house prices could come down, but you're talking an entire financial collapse. You're not getting a loan. You better have the cash, so you better be rich. All right. Well, the more separation between the rich and the poor. Surprise, surprise. All right. Because that's what really would happen. Because there's no way that you're going to go to the bank saying, okay, well, I have $10,000. I'd like to buy this, $300,000 house that was selling for $600,000. And they're going to be like, yeah, you're going to need a little bit more money than that, buddy. And you're going to have to prove your income really well. And you're going to have a hell of a credit score, because we're already being pulled back. Like, we can't even get the money. So how the hell are we going to give it to you? See, a lot of times people just think, oh, they can just go to the bank and get it. Like, the bank has the money, right? And it's just like, oh, it doesn't quite work that way, It does work that way, but not like that, Alrighty, guys. Hilarious. I'm glad you guys are having fun. Americans are crushing, yeah. Simon, what's your thoughts on COVID commercial real estate loans? Most of them have adjustable mortgages, and the new rates are almost triple the 3 years ago. Yeah, and I mean, they seem to be like very concerning to the Federal Reserve itself. And now, one of the things that I know, and I'm going to call it quits here in just a minute. One of the things that I did find, as far as like listening to the Federal Reserve, is that if they bring something up, Like if they talk about it, then you know they have like plans for it. It's not like it's going to hit them by surprise. And so I don't know what they are going to do. Like I have no clue. Like I don't know what the name of it is. I don't know what it's going to look like. I don't know what they're going to do in order to try and deal with a crashing commercial real estate market. I can imagine something like that taking place, and I can imagine the Federal Reserve doing something about it. And I don't know what kind of like bank term funding program type of application to the financial system that they would deploy in order to secure that particular market. But I would assume that they're going to do something since they talk about it, right? And that's where really what it comes down to is that can they isolate it to that? I don't know. I mean, is it much bigger than, going to trash the whole financial system and I can scare you with my whole like imagination of what it is that I think could happen because of it? I don't know if that's helpful, right? I mean, what I think is helpful is to understand that the Federal Reserve knows that it's coming and that they do plan for, unlikely expectations that they just don't communicate to the people. Like, there's no way that they deploy quantitative easing when they did without a plan for it. They didn't do the special purpose vehicles without a plan for it. The unusual and exigent circumstances mean, okay, if we had an unusual and exigent circumstances, these are the new tools that we can use, but we can't communicate these tools to the people and say, hey, we have these things sitting in the background, because if they did, they would price that into the market and then therefore it would no longer be an effective tool. Pretty crazy to think about, but that's really the truth of it. I hear many countries don't have 25, 30-year mortgages, just renewable every 5 years, like arms. Yeah, that's what I hear too. That's one of the great things that I think about the United States, in that I have a 30-year mortgage, right? I have it at 3.125% killer mortgage. And now I think like, okay, so let inflation run rampant. Like if inflation ran at 7%, then it's like I am actually getting paid to have that damn mortgage. Like that's incredible to think about, right? In a sense, right? And so if you kind of understand how the inflation thing works, I don't expect that to be the case, right? I expect inflation to come down. I expect it to come down fairly consistent to their long-term goals and expectations of a 2%, right? Now, whether or not they hit 1 or 3 on a consistent basis, 1 or 3% inflation, I don't think is really that significant, considering that they hardly had 2% inflation. And really the only time that anybody ever bitched about it was just recently when they saw the prices running up that were more about supply chain shortages than they were about actual inflationary pressures. So even now today, with the stubbornly high inflation, which seems to be moderately above 2% for some time, right in line with their goals, I don't know where it is that the Federal Reserve would try and change. Like to me, they got full employment going on. They got their moderately above 2% for some time. Yeah, they're like, they're hitting the target. They're like, don't tell anybody, man, but I think we're actually winning. But can't like nobody has to know that. No. Yeah. All right. Yeah, they actually talk about tokenizing too in that speech. I just read like once they tokenize the debt and you position yourself properly, you're rich. Yeah, but the rest of us suffer and will never get an interest rate like that. Hey, I don't know. Well, yeah, maybe you're right. I mean, that's possible. And they could take interest rates into negative territory too. Like, we don't know what's going to happen going into the future. And now, at the time that I bought my house, you would not believe the backlash, the emails, the people that told me that I was stupid, that I was going to lose everything, I was going to be underwater, like the nightmare of possibilities that came from the idea of purchasing this house was running through my head. It drove me absolutely crazy. And then it took every single dime out of me. I left me with $300 in my checking account. I had zero money after purchasing this house with the down payment that they required for it. And I thought for sure I was going to end up underwater and that I made the worst purchase in my entire life because I was going to end up in foreclosure again and all the other bullshit that could happen from it. And believe me, I thought about that stuff night after night after night. And I'm so glad I bought this house. I have something that has $100,000 worth of equity right now. Like, you know how far down the housing market would have to go? Like it could go 20% right now, 25%, I don't think, would still not have me underwater on this house. I am so far from underwater that I can't even, like, I don't even think about it. Like, I don't even think about how much the house is worth or whatever anymore. I just don't care. Like, that part has completely left. Like, I've let it all go, and the only thing I think about is that I got a place to live, right? And that, the interest rate on it is really low. That's the only thing I think about. Somewhere down 10 years from now or something like that, I might rent the property out and then I'll have some rental income, and that may be a great thing. But the fear that went into buying this house because I thought for sure that it was going to go down was unfounded, like completely. Like all the scary scenarios, I thought of them all. Like every one of them. Go back and watch my videos. Buying the house, it was horrible. Good times. All right. Always keeping it real, yeah. That's super important. Hell yeah, dude. Congrats. Yeah. I'm glad you own a home of your own, mister. Yeah, thank you. I mean, well, the thing is that when I was 40 years old, right, I was foreclosed on a home. I was like going into foreclosure on it. It was like I had no money, I had no car, I had no stuff. I didn't like everything was just bad, right? I had just given up drinking. I was like 40 years old. My 40th birthday, I was like done drinking. Like I quit on my 40th birthday, essentially. It was before that, but that's essentially when I remember it, right? And so now here it is, I'm 47, but you know how much time of screwing up, you know how long it takes to make up for that? Like, if you guys had known me before all this stuff, you would never have ever thought, man, dude, you're going to be on YouTube someday talking this stuff. Everybody's going to be listening to you, be on stage with guys like, J.R. Griffin and Ron Paul and, badasses like George Gammon and Mark Moss and Jeff Snyder, and like, I mean, no, like, no way would any of you would have put every dime that you own on saying, nope, that would never take place. But yet, here it is, right? It's because once you change it, once you change the way it is that you're going to conduct yourself and the way that you view the life and realities and everything else, you can really accomplish some pretty amazing things. And getting into this house just took about everything that I could possibly have done. Like, you wouldn't believe it. Like, I walked to work with shoes in my holes in my shoes, guys, to save up for the money. Like, I drove a $500 car, right? I still drive. This is like, a 99 Ford Explorer. It's got low miles on, so it's nice. But, really, I did everything I could. I just, like, I would not spend money on anything. It was like I was a tight ass forever. And, it was hard. It took everything. It took everything I could do to get into the house. Yeah. And then when I was getting there, it felt like I was being forced into it. It wasn't even like I had a choice in the matter, right? I was being kicked out of this house, so it wasn't necessarily getting kicked out. The landlord was selling it. Totally understand. Prices were like extremely high at the time, and there was nothing to buy. There was nothing out there. I couldn't find any place to rent. I offered a lady $10,000, but she said no pets. I said, I'll give you $10,000 deposit. Like, I'll get the 10 grand back, right? If then the dog does anything, I'll give you $10,000 down. She was like, no. And I couldn't believe it. And it was because she had just done this place. She, fine. Right? And so it was just like, let's go buy a house then. And there was like, the area that I wanted to be in, which was this area, had very few houses that I believe were what it was that I was looking for. They had literally like 3. This was one of them. So I didn't even really look at any other house. It was just like, I don't have time. One house, boom, do it. And I'm so glad I did. It was like I wasn't like I didn't even have any choice. Like, it really felt like that was one of the things that was driving me nuts, is like I really didn't feel like I had a choice in the matter. Like, I wanted to be able to buy a house, go like shop for a house, go and take my time, watch for a while, go and pick out the one that I think is like best suiting for me. I didn't feel like I had any of that. All right. Metal Sir, $5. Man, I'm just keep going. I should be like done. But you guys keep hitting me up here with super chats. In 72, recently out of college, bought 4-bedroom, 3-bath brick house in upscale neighborhood in North Carolina. 47,000, 4% scared the heck out of me. Yeah. Hey, right on DHRUV. Thank you, thank you very much for joining the channel. We'll have that live stream, that member-only live stream Wednesday evening. I'll get a link set up for it, so you'll know what time to join in on it. And there's plenty of membership-only videos down there that cover some of the past speeches that we've done from the Federal Reserve. It's inspiring, Simon. Yeah. Closing is a nightmare, so scary. Yeah, deja vu, I totally agree. And this is the thing, like, once I found out, like, when I talk to everybody, like, literally every single person that I know who has purchased property, like, every single one of them said that it was a scary deal. Like, they never, like, not one single one of them thought, like, didn't think that it was, like, in the pit of the stomach being, like, this is the one that's going to sink them or something like that. Every one of them said that. And so it's just like, now that I understand that, like, this is just part of the buying of a house, the purchasing of real estate, that's just part of the experience. It's easier to understand why it is that a lot of people out there have the feelings and the statements that they do about purchasing a home. Because I said a lot of the same things because of my fear and worry that was going to be coming, led my thoughts on what it was that was going to happen into the future of it. And literally, if I had followed that and I had a choice, I wouldn't have purchased the house, but I didn't feel like I had a choice. And so, like, talk about, like, double the anxiety of it, And so it's like, now what? UE, do you believe gas prices will go up drastically before winter? I don't know. I don't know. Probably not, because I don't think there's going to be as much economic activity happening, so therefore they wouldn't be as much demand, happening. So I can't imagine, like, without the demand, there wouldn't be a huge increase in prices. Now, considering the bullwhip effect, like, the drop in demand would also have a tendency to drop production, very much like what's happening with lumber right now. But if you go and you look at lumber production is dropping and the prices are dropping as well because of the lack of demand. So, where are we in the bullwhip effect? I'm not one who really follows oil that much, so I really don't know, like, where inventory levels are or how much is being produced or anything. I don't really pay that much attention to it. Not like I probably should, but there's other people out there who do, I guess. Damn, if I had known you were giving out memberships, I would have written something smart. Okay. I wish I would have bought when Obama was president. My sister put down 1,000 on her home in 2011. They were giving homes away back then. Yeah, it's because mine was going into foreclosure. That's when they were giving away homes, is because guys like me who bought in 2007 lost their job and couldn't do it anymore and couldn't make the payments, and so they had to give up their homes. So we all get our chances, right? We get them back, hopefully. If I didn't get this thing, I don't think I would have gotten a second chance. Like, if I lose this one, like, there's not that's a, like, I don't know how it is that I would ever be able to get back on the other side of the wedge again. Like, getting in this house was just like, it was probably one of the most critical points in my life that I actually got into. You think about it, most people at 47 years old have a lot of things going on. I just happen to be in this. This is it. This is the only thing I got, that and, small stock portfolio and whatever. So using this house in order to start escalating myself further is the only real option I have, right? And that's why I think, like, Mike Zuber and Matthew and all the rest of the guys, they keep, like, dude, you're close. Like, you got all the skills and the knowledge and all the other stuff to, like, work on homes and do this. And yeah, I just happen to be in a bad location. Don't buy a condo, people. It's all the worst parts of an apartment, but it's way harder to move, and the management has no ability to go into your neighbor's home if they are drug addicts. Silver tsunami coming. Yeah, I don't know. The silver tsunami thing, I think about that. right now there is a lot of people who would love to live in a home or own a home who actually live in a home with their parents. So when their parents pass, those people are going to have to find a place to live, which means that the demand goes up for another place to live, right? Because they have a place, now they don't, so now they got to go find a place. So that ends up actually working out as a neutral, right? So if this place becomes available, they have to go find another place. So either it becomes available or it doesn't, right? So I don't think a silver tsunami is going to create the wave of available inventory like a lot of people think it is. I mean, it could bring some, but as far as a like significant amount, I believe that most of those homes are probably already spoken for, right? In one way or the other. Let's see. Boston gonna win with finals, but I'm watching UE. Right on, guys. I have a couple of friends that will get the home when their parents pass. People will get home from the inheritance. Alrighty, guys, it was a lot of fun, but I think we should probably call it quits. I wanted to call it quits like 20 minutes ago, but I just love talking with you, and I don't like giving it up, and I just love just babbling on about theories and ideas and what it is that could come from the future and how it is to understand monetary policy, and then trying to sell my membership to all of you so I could get up to 10,000 members so I don't have to work anymore, and I can just have you guys sending me $1 a month for the rest of my life, and that would be an awesome life, right? So let's do that. Let's join the membership and join back here on Wednesday evening for a membership only live stream where we're breaking down Michelle Bowman's speech, talking about this digital ledger technology and how it is that the Federal Reserve can then use regulations to try and conduct the monetary policy through the actual already established industries that are out there using this distributed ledger technology. So anyway, good times. Always appreciate you being here. A lot of fun for the second time today because I'm just a YouTube junkie just like everybody else is. All right. Uneducated Economist. You guys let me know.